Hello, everyone. We are live. No, sorry. Of course, my Windows thing is updating, so that's why I have a blue tint on me. It'll go away shortly. Still trying to figure out how I can get my computers that are next to me here.
Yeah, you gotta mute that beeping again.
You're hearing a beeping again?
Yeah, that sort of alarm. I think when your text message goes off.
Yeah.
Or the extremely nerdy one but at least it has R2D2 better than
Yeah,
that's fine. Ringtone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Better than BB-8 at least.
A little bit, right? Sure. Why not?
You gonna tell me BB-8's better than R2D2?
Oh no. No.
All right. So I have a scientific fact.
Please start there, and then I want to talk. Go ahead.
The scientific fact is there have been 7 Earth-sized worlds now that have just been found basically in a star system near us. And so my question is, if they play hockey there, that could add a lot of new guys into the league.
You're right. I mean, and how does that affect the expansion draft? Is my question. Yeah, that's like really.
Well, if it's an Alpha Centauri, then we can plan that James T. Kirk will be born there in a few hundred years.
And it does say it's not about Alpha Centauri, Mike, so they must be listening to you. But I don't know what star system it's in. The other thing I wanted to mention is, because we have a lot of listeners and viewers in the NorCal area, I want to hope they're safe, hope they're not getting flooded out. There's a lot of bad flooding going on there. And I do want to say good for the people in the Sikh temples who have taken a lot of people in who've lost their housing and didn't have any food, because all of a sudden you're told to evacuate. You got to evacuate your house. You don't have anything with you, and then you don't have anything to eat. And they've been feeding people and doing some great things. And to me, that's what America is about. This isn't political. This is about helping people. That's
sure.
It.
No, I completely agree with you 100% there. And
and we have to congratulate former Buffalo Sabre and current TSN commentator Marty Baron, who yesterday became a U.S. citizen.
Oh, right, Marty. Way to go.
But here's the bad part. I feel bad for Marty because he's still saying he's an official Buffalonian. And we had this discussion with Marty once. We were going to the first Winter Classic, and it was me and Mike Del Tufo, and we were like, Marty, where do we go in Buffalo to celebrate New Year's Eve? Because we hear there's no place to go. And he goes, oh, no, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Long story short, it was a boring New Year's Eve because Buffalo is boring. Sorry, Mike. And we went back and we reported back to Marty. And Marty was like, oh, no, you just weren't in the right places. So I feel bad for Marty that he's identifying himself as a Buffalonian.
If you're looking for like the ball drop in Times Square, they do something similar at the Electric Tower at downtown Buffalo.
Oh, the Electric Tower! Oh, there's an Electric Tower in downtown Glassboro too.
Okay.
Going after Buffalo today, I didn't expect the.
Wow! Yeah, geez. Home of the draft combine, which will be at Russ, but since you're slagging Buffalo so much, you're not going to get let in any restaurants.
The food's great in Buffalo. That's the funny thing.
I attested that completely.
Yes, it's one of the great food towns in the United States. There's no question about that.
It was cities, I should say. It was to you, not anymore. All right. First off, so I am officially putting a moratorium on myself for political stuff. Okay, so
please, thank you.
No, and I'm sorry, I really am, because listen, I'm not.
It's your show. You can do whatever you want.
About this for a sec. So, no, honestly, I mean, we all have our opinions, and I have my opinions, and and I have some refugees in my family, so I have some tough. This has been really tough lately. But the bottom line is, I'm not saying any side's right or wrong. I will say this, that I really think that I've grown to understand the other side more through this whole process, which is really interesting. But the president, was different. Wasn't anyway. I'm not gonna say anything.
Well, the only thing I'll say, and this will be the last thing I say, is that the resistance to the current president is not just on one side; it's on both sides. There are.
And I think, but this is what I want to. Man, I hate to say this, but I really just, and it's not because I have like anything at all. So I think that there are some things about his stuff that he's doing. There's some of his policies that I honestly like a lot, and I just wish he was not. I wish he was a little more humble, and I mean that in all seriousness, just simply seriousness. I just wish he was a little less over the top and so obsessed with him being like I could get behind things more, but I don't want to go political any more than that. Okay, so this is
last word out of me. There you go.
Yes, and I really think more than anything else that Hockey Buzz and this podcast and everything else that I do should be an escape of all this crap. So that's our job. Because I see it. That's why I don't let people write. And you guys, and you know this because you guys write for Hockey Buzz. I don't let political columns on Hockey Buzz. And I feel like I have let some people down by just getting my emotions getting the better of me. So I'm going to from now on just completely just focus on having fun with hockey and let this be your escape. And the world goes on. We'll go on with or without us, and with or without my opinion. So I'm fine with that on this. So that's all. So let's get into the show. We got lots to talk about, and I'm just leave it there. Anyway, so okay. So let me just get my notes up, and then we'll start here. All right. We're gonna do some questions today from the What the Heck Wednesday. You guys had a lot of good questions in there, so we're gonna do some of those as part of our show today, which will be fun.
All right, cool.
Okay.
And I'll answer some of those also in the blog later. I'm saying some differently.
You sound like you're Scotty in the engine room. It sounds like you're hitting a lot of buttons, but nothing's happening.
No, I got it. So now we're good.
I used to question. I always thought Scotty should have been fired. Like if I were Kirk, I'd have fired Scotty early on. I would have.
Doesn't mess up a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, when was he ever really good? Like,
and when with the spaceship, the famous saying of "we need more power." When are you not using all the power?
Right.
This also goes to my thing with airplanes when I travel. They say, well, we're going to try to make up the time in the air. If you could have gotten there faster anyway, why are we going slower? Like we're in the air.
That's because the warp engines had certain capacity. They could go to warp factor 8, but if it was 9, they could explode.
Well, then you shouldn't go there.
Well, right, but Kirk always pushed the edge of the envelope, and he said, go to warp 15.
I mean, Kirk was a maniac. That's true.
Right.
Now, there you go. So that's that. All right. Okay.
With the women as well.
Yes. He liked green women, so good for him.
He liked any woman. Right.
And out of focus again today, aren't I?
No, you're just white as usual.
You're just a very white guy.
Let me try real quick before we start the show. Let me go. I'm actually on the right thing. That's good. All right, never mind. I'm on the right. I'm on the best I can do. This is the best thing. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. Let me just. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, February 22nd, 2017.
I'm Mike Aruzzi. Oh, sorry, Michael Lagello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and I won $10 this time 40 years ago. Wow.
You won money on that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I beat my brother in a bet. He thought he was snookering me. And 37 years, yeah. And he bet me $10, and I won.
Very interesting. I mean, so we're talking, of course, about the Miracle on Ice, or I'm wearing my USA shirt today to represent.
I always wear USA hockey, but whatever.
There you go. And which was 37 years ago today, a day that really changed everything in the U.S. I think for hockey and made it, and really was a big day. We've talked about it before, but I think that it's always fun to talk about where you were when it happened, because to me it was a funny situation, because at that point in time, in the U.S. where I was, at least, you couldn't get the game on TV. So live, it was the kind of thing that it would be tape delayed, So, and this, of course, is, believe it or not, there was a time before Twitter, and
was there?
There was no way of finding anything out, right? So I remember very clearly I was out playing football in the yard with my friends, and then checking KYW News Radio in Philadelphia because they would do news, they would do the score, they do sports every day at quarter after and quarter of the hour.
Maloney doing the update?
I don't think so. He's not that old, is he?
He was. I mean, he passed a couple of years ago, but he was.
Yeah, maybe.
And it could have been.
And it was. And I remember we would stop the game specifically, at the quarter of and quarter after the hour, just see what the score was. And then when it got really interesting, they would do the score more often. So I remember playing football on my outside on my front yard with a bunch of friends of mine. And I remember having KYW News Radio blasting in the yard So it's here, all the traffic reports, all the weather reports, and every once in a while they would come in and, but the U.S. has, 2 minutes to go in the game. So
Well,
that's my memory of that, and how crazy we went. And then watching the game at night, of course, when they actually did play it here in the States, that was something. What do you got, Mike?
this is the hockey news from exactly 37 years ago today.
Wow.
Now, obviously, the hockey news at that point, the game was being played that day. So all they had was Canada, U.S. given pre-Olympic jolt.
Right.
And U.S. and Canada. Here's a picture of Mark Johnson on the cover of the hockey a couple weeks before.
Right.
I was one of the few people, because being in Buffalo, being in a border town, we had the ability, using the antenna on the roof, to pick up CTV, or that's how I watched Leaf games when I was a kid, me and my brother, because we could pick up the CBC in Toronto and watch Leaf games. Well, the Olympics were on CTV, and I watched the game. I was probably one of the few people in the country that watched the game live, because it was broadcast live on CTV. It wasn't broadcast live by ABC. I think it was 7:30 that night or something like that they tape delayed. And then they played it again the following morning, which was a Saturday. So, I mentioned this on Twitter earlier, and found out that I always thought the play-by-play announcer was Don Chevrier, who was a play-by-play announcer in Canada for a long time. But apparently it was a guy named Bernie Pascal, who is the father of Brad Pascal, who's married to Cassie Campbell from Hockey Night in Canada. So, so it was pretty bizarre. But I remember distinctly watching that game 3
miracles. You didn't hear the "Do you believe in miracles" type thing.
Right. I mean, nobody heard that until that night, and obviously Al Michaels, did it live, but they didn't, as some Olympic situations are. I mean, maybe they just didn't recognize, they were undefeated at that point. They had only had that tie against Sweden. So, you knew there was a key game.
Kelly Lindbergh.
Yep. Bill Baker with the tying goal late in the third.
Yep. And I remember that was the first time I saw Kelly Lindbergh play, and became my favorite player. I have a picture, a big painting of him back there. That was the very first time I had seen Lindbergh play, and I remember watching the game and them saying, "Oh, there's a goalie. The goalie for Team Sweden has been drafted by the Flyers," which at that point, was something you wouldn't necessarily know. Right. It was just like, "Oh, wow, really? They drafted a guy to go after goalie from Sweden." So,
well, I'll wait till Russ gets back. But the funny thing was, and I was looking for it this morning, because I thought it might be in an old closet or something like that. When the in 1980, since the Olympics were in Lake Placid, I believe it was the Rangers, the Islanders, and the Sabres all wore a Lake Placid Olympic patch on their jersey.
Right. I think you're right.
I'm pretty sure that they all did, because I had someone in my family had a Sabres jacket, and they had the Lake Placid sticker, the thing on there. It's gone now, but that would be a collector's item if I still had it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
you'll deliver it. Be right back.
Okay, no problem. The other thing I got was the other thing I remember about that was the guy who lived across the street from me had just gotten back from college, and for the break, I guess it was, or he was a really good friend of mine, but he was way older than me, and he went to St. Lawrence University, and was in the same hall at that point with Ken Morrow.
Okay.
So I was following, he knew and was good friends with Ken Morrow, so he'd come over and watch the games with us, and he was like, that's my buddy, which was really fun at the time too. So, and Ken Morrow, of course, had that incredible year where he went, and went on and won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that big of I mean, it's a big accomplishment, don't get me wrong, but that's not that big of an accomplishment now with the pros. With the pros in the Olympics. Jonathan Toews wins a gold medal and then wins the Stanley Cup. It's big, but it's not as big as being an amateur, winning a gold medal, going to the New York Islanders as Morrow did, and then winning a cup that year.
Oh yeah, that was a huge difference. And back then that was unheard of. And Morrow was not. He was a serviceable player for the Islanders too, and actually came right into the NHL and was pretty impressive. And really just like one of your stay-at-home defensemen, which is funny in an era that he was an impactful player.
It's ironic. We're talking about this, and John Shannon from Sportsnet just tweeted, Miracle on Ice 37 years ago today, seen live in Canada, tape delayed in U.S.
Yeah, and it was. And we all kind of suffered with that, unfortunately. But luckily, I when Miracle was coming out, I had a chance to interview the actors and some of the participants. And so McClanahan was there, and Ruzioni was there, and Craig was there. And it was great to sort of get my big thing about the Miracle on Ice wasn't so much the players. It was really Herb Brooks, because I always looked at Herb Brooks and said, when you really thought about some of these players, I mean, some of them turned out to be really good. Ken Morrow probably doesn't get enough credit, and
Neil Broughton.
Neil Broughton's really great, and there were probably 4 or 5 really good.
Christian, right, was a good player.
Who?
Dave Christian, right? Is it Dave Christian? What's his name? Was it? What am I thinking of?
No, I don't know who you're thinking of.
Dave Christian, yes.
Dave Christian was okay. Dave Silk was good.
Mark Pavlich.
Pavlich was, probably one of the 3 or 4 best. But that's what I'm saying. If you really break it down, there were probably 4 or 5 really good NHL players that came out of that, really top notch. Others played, but Brooks definitely got them to play beyond their capability. And that's what I always looked at Herb Brooks. And people could argue this, but I think that was maybe the best coaching job I'd ever seen in my life for any team in any situation.
Yeah, I mean, Herb Brooks was an amazing coach, and he coached my friend Tom Laidlaw for a while too at New York, and Tom became good friends with him. So I would hear some great Herb Brooks stories. That movie didn't even do it justice. Apparently, he was, and as good as that movie was, and as good as he did in that movie, Herb Brooks just had so many tricks up his sleeve that he was just a perfect coach in terms of he was a strategy guy. And my favorite line in that thing, and this is and I've used this, and I think so many people who've coached youth people have used this, that the speech of the 2 concepts of we could play them 9 times and they would 10 times and they would win, but not today.
Right.
Yeah, it was a Disney cleansed version.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a Disney cleansed version.
But it's still. I mean, it's funny because about 15 minutes before the show, because Bob McKenzie had posted a little kid doing the Herb Brooks speech, and I wanted to hear the Kurt Russell version, and and I always liked Kurt Russell as an actor, but he sort of was above himself in that one, because he's not talked about as like an Oscar nominee or anything like that. He's just a really good actor who's been good in Hollywood for a long time, but that role I think will transcend him past the time when he passes away, because it was just a great role and he did a great job at it.
Well, I'll tell you this, at the time the actors for this were mostly unknown. I interviewed Eddie Cahill, who was the guy who played Jim Craig, and I was watching this ABC series, and I just forgot the name of it. Hold on. It's called Deadline. And it took me a few minutes to realize, and it's got Haley Atwell in it. She'd done work with Marvel. And it took me probably 15, 20 minutes to realize, this is Eddie Cahill starring next to her. So he's actually starting to really become a big deal. And it was a good movie. It was. But it's definitely something memorable. And I always go back to the Herb Brooks thing, because when anybody was talking about what happened in the games, or even the actors when they were talking about it, everything centered around Herb Brooks to me.
Yeah. No, it did. And it had to, right? I mean, it was such an amazing performance, and the way Herb was he was the guy on that,
Yeah.
He was the guy, and by far, the player that that really brought everybody together on that. I mean, just the player that brought the whole thing together. I just was more amazed than ever, to hear people's reaction from him. I just talked to somebody about it recently. It doesn't fade. It doesn't fade. It's such a great story. That was there's so many great lines in that speech that I've used.
But people don't. I mean, we know it, but people don't realize that was not the gold medal game. They had to beat Finland.
Right.
And they were trailing Finland going into the 3rd period, I believe. So I mean, that was not.
Finland didn't fool around with their goalies. Like, it wasn't like there wasn't anything you could point to in that game where you could say, all right, there was a break there for the U.S. team because clearly Russia screwed around with their goalies, and that really did help the U.S. In the Finnish game, it was just a straight comeback.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, right. That was just and they just, but it was that team was yeah. The other thing that I think is so, we're not going to defend the Russians. We're going to attack them.
Right.
And that was such a great line in that and absolutely from talking to people, absolutely what he said. That was exactly he's like, they're going to spin and spin and spin. And what are we going to do? We're going to attack them at all angles, and the drawing on the board, and that was just an amazing thing, and that just completely played into the politics at the time and what was happening.
It helped shape USA Hockey. I mean, without that win, I'm not sure where USA Hockey would be today because it shaped a generation of players.
Yeah, the funny thing is that the Russians dominated before that game and dominated after that game. They won the Canada Cup in '81. They won the They won the challenge, the NHL challenge. I think it was 79. They destroyed the NHL All Stars. So it was just like the stars were aligned, and Brooks did a great job. They got goaltending out of their head from Craig.
Yeah.
He never repeated that. He played in Atlanta, played in Boston, and he was not a great pro at all. But for
I saw his first NHL game with Atlanta. I was at that game. That was really cool.
I think the big thing for Brooks was that he pushed the speed game when speed wasn't necessarily at the top of everybody's thoughts for hockey. It is now, but it wasn't then. But he figured he had to be different, so he wanted to have the fastest team.
You're absolutely right. No, it's really true. It's really very true.
Mark Johnson was one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, what a great memory, and I'm glad we get to talk about it every year and relive it, because it was just in America, and I think and even in Canada, like I've talked to people in Canada who said it was just the same kind of feel. Everybody wanted the Americans to beat the Russians.
I've spoken to Finns that are okay with it. Like, that's the funny thing.
Oh, because the Russians were this monolith. They were just like mechanical and how good they were. They had this system.
And they weren't really amateurs. The whole thing was like they were.
There's speculation they were doing performance enhancing drugs before.
Sure, they were. I mean, I shouldn't say that.
Now here's the thing, though.
Paying attention to that.
After we all saw the Red Army movie, you do in retrospect, you do feel bad for those players, and we didn't feel bad. We hated those players then, but now all these years later, I feel bad for those players, what they went through.
Well, this is the interesting thing about, and I've said this about Russian players now too in the NHL. They're some of the nicest players in the league. I mean, they are absolutely off the charts. I mean, because I grew up in that era, where Russia was evil Russia or whatever, and they are right now. When you talk to a Russian player in the NHL, even if they can't speak English, and even if they're struggling to understand you, they are so appreciative that you even care to talk to them.
They try and communicate with you on no matter what they do.
They do, and they're some of the humblest players in the league,
except for Ilya Kovalchuk, but otherwise the rest were
right. But and the reason is pretty simple, that they grew up in a crazy time, and they often had to wait in line for food and stuff like that, and now they're making millions of dollars playing a sport they love and living in luxury in the U.S. I mean, they are completely appreciative of this whole thing. They are not. There's nothing going on there, where I think some Canadians and Americans even sometimes have that, are not jaded, but more jaded than the Russians are. The Russians are just so, this is an amazing thing, and then they carry that through. So they're the nice.
They do. I mean, I could tell you 2 years ago at the NHLPA event I cover every year, when they were done playing a game of shinny, there were like 7 Russians that stayed for like the next 20 minutes, just shooting the puck around. And everybody was gone. Like practically they were turning off the lights, and these guys were still around. I have some video of it on it used to be on Vine when Vine was a thing. And it was amazing to me that these guys, they didn't want to leave. They just enjoy the game that much.
They have a love of the game, and and so when people talk about Ovechkin, who goes over the top and crazy when he scores goals, it's really actually legitimate. It's actually what he feels.
It is.
It's not. Gosh, talking to guys like, Nabokov, like I remember talking to him, just, you couldn't feel like there wasn't a nicer guy out there. So, but we'll move on to what everybody wants to talk about today, which are hockey rumors for sure. And and we talked a little bit about Evander Kane yesterday. I wanted to get into it again today because there's more talk now. And now that LA actually may indeed be getting in on this, and that also spurs off to another discussion about LA that's just breaking in the last few hours as well. So, but first of all, let's start with Evander Kane. I put some things up today that, in the blog, some really crazy statistics about how well he actually is playing. Like that he is, since December 1st, only Sidney Crosby scored more goals than Evander Kane in the NHL. That's an astonishing number,
Yeah, it's a great number. I mean, Eichel's had a lot to do with it too.
He sure has, but Evander has really been, it has gotten to the point now where, he went, and when you look at his trajectory of like he almost untradeable at one point during the season, to the point where maybe he's untouchable now. Like when you talk to some people,
No,
I don't believe that.
No. Then this is what I want to talk to you about. There are people now in Buffalo who are saying, no, why would we trade him? There's no reason to trade him. He's our best scorer. He's and he's young and he's going to be around for a while. So it's not like this guy's old.
They may be saying that in the short term, in the sense that we're still in the playoff race. So why would we trade him now because he's doing so well? But I mean, we've heard for not just early in the season. We've heard for almost since the trade with Winnipeg that this was not a long-term thing. And remember, he was traded from Winnipeg to Buffalo when he was out for the year. So it benefited the Sabres in the sense that they were getting a guy who was going to be active and playing the following year, but wasn't going to hurt them in their tank for either for McDavid, or it ended up being Eichel. Now, with the problems that he's had off the ice, yes, they're glad. They're very happy that he's performing now, because now it would have been a burden. It would have been something where they probably would have had to retain salary to move Kane. Yeah. Now there'll be teams, I'm sure, that would be eager to take him on. But I don't think that even with him scoring at this pace, Russ, that they're going to be interested in signing him to a long-term deal after his contract is up next year. This is get as much for you can for him right now, if it's at the deadline or if it's over the summer. And I think that we're not going to trade him is just them saying, okay, give us more.
They may hang on to him through the season, but I expect him to be traded at the draft then.
All right, so this is my thing. Okay, let me make my point. I hear what you guys are saying, and I'm going to say that as the proper thing to say. But here's the thing. Yesterday we had a long talk about at the end of the show, and it actually continued after the show, and it continued on a phone call with Mike and I after the show about assets and all that kind of stuff. And we talk about this all the time, assets, and GM seeing guys is, and then we also talk about selling high versus selling low.
Right.
These players like stocks. And I was talking to somebody about that, and they brought this up to me. They're like, yeah, I understand that everybody says that. But they said, can you name the last player that was sold high, quote unquote, where they turned around and they said, the player's like, oh, he's been a problem, but he's doing so well right now, and was actually traded. And when he said that to me, I'm like, you're right. Like,
yeah, but there's players. We just may not think of it this second.
How about Marty St. Louis?
Yeah, they got a ton for him.
All right, but that's not a bad.
And the Rangers negotiated against themselves.
That's true, but they were going to move him anyway, right? I mean, the Blues.
No, I don't think so. It was only until he said something that they were going to move him.
Demanding a trade, so that's a little bit different, right? Okay, so if that's a demanding of a trade, I'm talking about a player that's viewed as like a trouble player, who suddenly gets his game together, and then is turned around and someone's like, oh, while he's getting his game together, we're going to sell him high, and then some team picks him up and is sorry that they picked him up. I cannot remember that instance happening. I really can't. And we talk about trades all the time. We always talk about selling high, and I don't know that ever happens in the NHL. Like I think that usually when a player is troubled and then turning it on, that player is usually held on to because they're considering, okay, maybe he's gotten over it. Because
the other team may think that eventually that problem is going to rear its ugly head again. But the thing is with Kane is he's in a position, and there are other players out there like this that have 1 year left. that would be preferable for teams that are looking for scoring than to go out into free agency this summer and sign somebody for 4 or 5 years. Yes, it's possible there's a recurrence of his problems that he's had in Winnipeg and had in Buffalo, but it's a low-risk move in the sense that you're only obligated for a year for Evander Kane. Plus, I think Buffalo is ready to move. I mean, this is good news for the Sabres. He's scoring. He's living up to his level of talent. They can get value for him now. They're just as desperate to get defensemen as Toronto is. They could get a defenseman for Evander Kane.
I think Eck makes a good point, although here's my counter. I found something funny. So I wanted to see what the Kings got for Sean Avery when they traded him to the Rangers. And they got Marc-Andre Cliche and Jan Merrick. And it's funny because Marc-Andre Cliche is still playing. He plays for the Marlies.
Yep.
But when they traded him, was it
he
that
was a top prospect. He was a pretty well thought of prospect in the Rangers system, Marc-Andre Cliche. He was at the time.
Okay. No, but how about but with Avery, at that point, had he gotten his game together and they traded him at that point, or was it?
Remember, L.A. was his second stop. He went Detroit to L.A., right. New York to Dallas, then back to New York.
All it said was, like, if I read the headline here, which I think is off of the L.A. Times, left wing Sean Avery's controversial-filled 3+ seasons with the Kings ended. So I mean, he's a good example.
Okay. And maybe he had, I'm trying to think if he had turned his game around, like that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Like, he's a trouble player, obviously, and I guess.
Patrick Maroon, he had problems with Anaheim. He got traded to Edmonton.
It's not bad, but then they had problems with Anaheim.
He hasn't had any problems with Edmonton, at least not that I've heard of. I mean, I think trouble players get traded. I mean, Doug Gilmour had troubles in St. Louis. He got traded to Calgary. I mean, and he's a Hall of Famer, and he probably would have been a Hall of Famer if he had stayed with St. Louis. But there were things that happened in St. Louis. He moved on to Calgary. Then he had contract problems. He moved on to Toronto. It happens. It does happen.
Yeah, it's more rare than it is than we talk about it though. Like to me, it's something that.
Right, and also, the thing is, and this is, we don't know a lot of the problems that happen because they're not public knowledge, but we know from hearing discussions that we have privately with people that players do have problems, and they end up getting Gary Leeman had problems with a teammate, and that was the reason he got traded.
All right, let's talk about. All right, you know what? Now that you say this,
all right, but here I've got the ultimate blockbuster.
I could say Jeff Carter is one of these players.
Yes,
but I've got the ultimate trade for one of these guys.
Okay,
Chris Pronger.
Who was he traded for?
To Anaheim, Joffrey Lupul.
No, not to Anaheim. In Hartford is when he was troubled.
Right.
Brendan Shanahan.
That's a blockbuster.
Yep.
Right, that's a blockbuster.
Yeah, and then he was traded. Then he went St. Louis to Edmonton.
But there's a difference with players that are considered trouble players off the ice but still producing, versus when I talk about Jeff Carter, he might have been trouble off the ice, but he never didn't produce. He was scoring. Right. There was no question that he was still, he was what he was, and off the ice he may have had issues.
I think what you're saying is I think the high ones exist, but they're few and far between. I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
What I think is that there's no disputing Evander Kane's talent, but he would have to produce at the level that he's producing at right now to make it worth the while of another general manager to take the risk to make a trade.
Right.
If he's a problem child and he's scoring 15 goals a year, screw him. If he's scoring 30, 35 goals a year,
you have a better chance that Buffalo's going to sit there and say, well, maybe he's turned his game around and keep him. Then you have a chance of a general manager who doesn't know him taking.
And yes, but I think the overriding factor here, with Buffalo, is the fact that his contract is up at the end of next year. It's, do you want to spend, and he's making $5.25 right now. Do you want to sign him at 26 or 27 years old? I think he'd be 27, something like that, to a 5 or 6 year deal, making more than he's making now, because that's what he'll be asking for. Yeah. And I think the Sabres will say no, thank you.
The Sabres have been burned a few times by him, so there's no question they're not going down that route.
I don't know. There's no question. I mean, if they make the playoffs and he has a half decent,
they're not giving him a new contract. There's no way.
Puts in 40 goals next year or something like that. I mean, say continues.
They'll trade him at the deadline if that's the case.
I would argue. We'll remember this moment.
I'm going to guess. This is just a guess because I don't know the man.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess Terry Pegula probably knows something about Evander Kane and probably would not give him the money.
Yes.
But
Terry Pegula is going to walk away, and this guy is a good citizen. But Terry Pegula is going to walk away from Tyrod Taylor in the NFL because he's got a balloon payment of $27 million this upcoming season, and
he's going to avoid the same thing with the Sabres. He will.
But also, I think Terry Pegula is the kind. I mean, I've met him a couple times, and he seems like the kind of guy that if someone legitimately has turned it around, like we have to, do we give Evander Kane a benefit of the doubt at some point here, guys?
It's only been 6 months that he's turned it around. That's not enough.
And could be a year,
Being in Buffalo and talking to Sabre fans and seeing what the media are reporting regarding the viewpoint of the Sabre fan wants Evander Kane traded. They're looking at his rally right now and how he's scoring. Everybody's saying great, now we can get something for him. They're not saying great, now we can keep him.
I would liken Evander Kane to Ricky Henderson. Ricky Henderson was always good. Now he's obviously a lot better than Kane. And then there was always problems, and then there was teams that couldn't wait to get rid of Ricky Henderson.
How about Terrell Owens? Okay,
same thing. Same thing.
You have these that are like that, and you do have these players
but nobody holds those players long term.
But those players do get sold low, like Evander Kane got sold low to Buffalo. I would argue.
Yes.
That does happen, right? But
but as I said before, there were extenuating circumstances in that deal because he was out for the year, and the Sabres were in that mode.
Right.
There were
those guys don't get long-term deals in any of those sports. Owens never had a long-term deal. Henderson may have had one.
All right, if he finishes with 30 goals this year and 40 goals next year,
he's not getting a long-term deal. Not from that team.
He will be the Canadian Alexander Semin. He will get a year or two every year because nobody will want to make long-term commitments.
Perhaps. All right, let's answer some questions from HockeyBuzz.
Okay.
Some good questions on here. So
I think that's a good analogy, Mike, because Semin used to produce for a while too. So
you had to hold his feet to the fire.
I mean, Radulov didn't even get a long-term deal.
And there's the dilemma. While you're looking up the question, Zach, there's the dilemma for Montreal because they love what Radulov is doing. The goal he scored last night against the Rangers was
unbelievable, sick.
Unbelievable sick.
And Carey Price made the save of the year last night.
Yeah, he did. We're gonna show both those later.
He's got amazing skill, but he's making $5.5 million on a 1-year deal. He's expecting a long-term deal, and if they don't give it to him, he will go someplace else.
Yeah, and Thomas Plekanec looked awfully good in that game. Under Claude Julien, I'm not moving Thomas Plekanec. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's you might be right. I actually think that Montreal is the perfect place for Evander Kane to go. No, I really do. I do.
No way.
I talked to somebody else in the NHL who agreed with this. A really high-ranking person in the NHL who said, that's the one city where you're under such a microscope and that's a city where you're allowed to be eccentric. So you can go in there, and you can, he's not going to be able to get away with much because he's going to be constantly watched and followed. And then he's also going to be, and also he's allowed. They embrace eccentric players.
His problem is not eccentricity. His problem is
reliability.
Exactly. More than that.
Well, maybe, but maybe that gets. I don't know. Maybe that comes. We'll see.
I wouldn't put him there.
No.
All right. Couple questions here. So Slim Skinny 24 asks.
The names always make me laugh.
If you're on if you go to HockeyBuzz on Wednesday, sometimes I do this question, what the heck Wednesday it's called. So you can ask a question there, and I'll answer them. We'll answer them here, answer them on the next blog too, in different, but I'm going to put this up to you guys. Are the Flyers going to keep Neuwirth or Mason, and what are the changes the Flyers make? What are the chances the Flyers make a move for Anthony Duclair? Seems like a minor move to land him is more likely than nothing.
So
I think they'll try for Duke. Go ahead, Mike.
Do we think they're going to move one of the two goaltenders?
Yes.
They're not keeping Mason.
I think they're going to move one of them. Yes.
Yeah, I think Mason is going to be moved. I think he might already know that.
Yeah. I think Mason will be moved. I think they'll make a short-term offer to Neuwirth, who may not accept it, but I think they'll make a short-term offer to him, and I think they'll try for Anthony Duclair. and I think they'll trade Mark Streit. Delzato, they may or may not be able to trade, but they can't trade. See, they can't trade all of these defensemen because they have about 2 they can bring up. And Schultz will probably be the other one because he's really not been playing. And the funny thing is, I had this discussion with somebody on Twitter. They're like, well, who wants Nick Schultz? He's not playing. I'm like, well, A, he's fresh, and B, he is a veteran with a lot of experience. So he is the kind of guy that teams want.
Yeah. I think that and Schultz is a great.
He's a great locker room guy too.
Great locker room guy, yeah. Would be, he's like a captain type player. So I think that's seriously. Columbus, here we go. I agree with most what you said, by the way. I think they are going to go after Duclair to a degree. I've heard this. I don't know that they're going to offer as much as Ottawa will, from what I've heard. So we'll see.
The only thing with Duclair is that Arizona would be selling him low.
Well,
Yeah.
Right, but I think they would offer Scott Lawton. I do.
Oh yeah, no, they would definitely offer Scott Lawton.
And that might be somebody that Arizona looks at because they don't have a lot of fourth line guys, actually.
Yeah. I mean, Duclair, though, remember, I think Duclair is a more popular player out there than people give credit for. And because
he's popular everywhere. He's actually got a great personality.
Yeah.
The reason he's popular,
they put out a press release when they sent him to the minors. I mean, that was
the reason.
I think trading him for Scott Lawton, don't think would happen. I think that they have to do something. They're not going to trade him for a fourth line player.
The reason he's popular is because he's cheap and he's talented.
Right.
That's why he's popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think he's
But
excited.
he has a great personality, and I think.
I don't know him, and I'll take your word for that.
I don't think the price in Phoenix or Arizona matters to the fans out there. I think it's more like he's an exciting player, and he has scored some highlight goals that people have seen over and over.
And he's on his entry-level deal, the last year of his entry-level deal, making less than $1 million. He's cheap, and he's got an upside. I think that's why there might be multiple teams who will put in an inquiry to Chaika before next Wednesday to see if he's willing to trade him. But, we'll see.
All right, well, here's another player. Eck, would you trade Nick Cousins for Duclair?
Yes.
See, so they could offer either one of those guys.
Yeah, I would.
Would you trade would you trade Robert Hogg for Duclair?
No.
Yes.
Defensemen are worth more right now.
Because that's what probably the Coyotes are looking for.
The Flyers have a lot of them, so.
Right.
They do, but the problem is there's a gap between who can come up and who's ready and who's not, and they want Sanheim to play another year down there at top pairing minutes, so there's a gap there. Hogg is ready. Morin, it's really questionable whether he is or not. They're going to probably try him out.
Yeah.
And then, you're looking, there's another couple of guys, Wilcox. All these guys are a couple of years away. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with that. All right, moving on to this is from a Blue Jackets fan. DJ Baker 0513. Does Yarmo have any blockbusters up his sleeve? Does Columbus do anything at the trade deadline? By the way, at Hockey and Heels this past weekend, Yarmo said Hockey and Heels is a women's hockey thing. I can't remember exactly what it is, but and it's a really cool event. I can't remember. I'm going to look it up. Hockey and Heels this past weekend, Yarmo said talks with Vegas are going well, and he believes he has a deal in place for the expansion draft. So
okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. We did find out yesterday that after it was reiterated during the show that Vegas will not be making any moves before March the 1st. I don't think Columbus has a blockbuster in them. I think they have a tweaking move, a move that will help them depth wise, but I don't think that they're going to move anybody of major. They're not going to be in on, getting a number one, getting a center or anything like that.
Here's the thing. They know they're going to get Pierre-Luc Dubois most likely next year.
Yeah.
Right.
I kind of think, and even though you don't have to protect Sonny Milano because he's a 2014, he's a name they could throw out there that if they feel like they're a player short,
right,
they could get a really good return for.
Sure.
So I don't. If you call that a blockbuster, then I think that is something that exists.
But what do you think their need is? I think they may need a little more scoring. So
they need skilled players.
They definitely need a top six sort of skilled guy that
they don't have a star, on their forward front. I mean, and they have very few players that are diminishing assets. This is the thing about this team. They have, you could say Hartnell.
Hartnell's a diminishing asset. He's one of them.
Dubinsky is a diminishing asset, but
right.
those are the two guys. Beyond that, though, this is the youngest team in the NHL, even with those guys in the lineup. That's the youngest team in the NHL. So I think that Jarmo's he's going to ride this out. I think that he likes what he has. I don't know, I believe it or not, I think the goaltending issue in Columbus might be something bigger than we realize.
Here's the thing. Okay, if you wanted to on Columbus, if you could get Thomas Vanek for Milano and think you could sign him for after this year, to me, it might be worth it because he is sort of a talent that they're missing.
Yeah, that would be a move that makes a lot of sense because his salary is not out of whack, and he can score goals. He could be on your number 1 or number 2 power play. That would really add up. Yeah.
And Detroit, I think, would take a kid like Milano because they do need to do a little bit of a reset.
Yeah. I mean, the one player I mentioned before that I still hear that they do have interest in is Patrick Eves. And he's not exactly fulfilling that need we're talking about. But he is a solid player. He is the kind of guy who you want to have around young players. And I think that they're looking at this long term still. They're I think where they were super low last year. They don't really see themselves still as suddenly one of the best teams in the NHL, even though they had that streak. They see themselves as a team that's still that this window. I heard Jarmo say the other day, our window is just opened by a crack right now, and that's how he sees it, as a team that
Yeah, I don't know if Eves is like, they have Atkinson, right? Like, I don't know how many of those kinds of players you need.
And again, Eves, he's having a career year. He's not a sniper. He's having a career.
It's not even hhis sniper.
No, but he's a consistent goal scorer, Mike. Like, most times, if he plays with decent line mates, he's going to get between 10 and 15 goals a year.
Right. But I mean, he scored 21. He's on a path for 30. He's not a 30-goal scorer. That's what I'm saying.
When he's been healthy, he has scored. And beyond that, though, he just has – this is a guy who's played in a lot of situations, with a lot of teams in a lot of situations. I think that's what Columbus needs, because Columbus doesn't have a lot of those guys. Like, you can say Atkinson doesn't really have any playoff experience at all.
No. And you mentioned goaltending. I think that's been sort of overblown because I know they got rid of McElhinney on waivers, and they've been rotating Korpisalo and Forsberg as the backup to Bobrovsky. And Korpisalo's I saw him play against Toronto last week. He played very well.
He's a good goalie. And they like Forsberg as well. So they like both of them. I know we've had
So I think, and they even after playing well, they sent Korpisalo down to Cleveland and brought up Forsberg. So I think they're just rotating those guys, giving them a little. I think
they want Korpisalo to play a lot of top minutes, because I don't think they believe for a minute that Forsberg could ever be a number 1 for them. But somewhere down the line, Korpisalo might be able to be, if for some reason they were ever going to trade Bobrovsky, or he got injured and was out for half a season or more.
Well, they're in a risky position, Russ, because Korpisalo is 23 years old. They're going to protect Bobrovsky.
Yeah.
Or do you think they're going to protect Korpisalo and say, okay, if you want to take Bobrovsky's $7 million contract, go ahead? They
might do that because they might sort of throw that risk out there, like, hey, if you want to take on this salary.
Right. That's what Ottawa purportedly is going to do with Dion Phaneuf. They're going to say, we're going to protect Cody Ceci.
Yeah.
And we're going to ask you to waive the no move clause so you can be exposed, but we want to keep you. But if
it might not be a bad move for Columbus, because I don't know if Vegas really wants to take on a salary of a guy who does get hurt once in a while, even though he's a great goalie.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, next question. This is a good one too. Here we go. Okay. Hey, Eck. It seems as though talks between the Avs and the Canes have died down, since Francis doesn't want to give up a young established D-man like Slavin for a player having 2 years left on his deal before becoming a UFA. Are the Canadiens Islanders the favorites now if he moves? This is for Duchesne. Also, is Anaheim now the favorite to get Landeskog with their young D-men like Vatanen, since talks with Boston died down because they don't want to include Carly or McAvoy? This comes from Avs are champs 01, and this is first of all, very good history of how a lot of this has gone down, because you're right about a lot of the stuff that you're saying here. It does seem like talks have faded with the Canes, but I wouldn't rule them out still. Like, I still think that Carolina could get in and could be in the Duchesne hunt, at the end. I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking about it on a week from now.
Well, seeing the Canes recently, I mean, the reality of them not having enough scoring to compete for a playoff spot is finally, reared its ugly head again. I mean, they have Aho, they have Skinner, Stahl's a pretty good player. They have Teravainen, but there's just not enough scoring depth. Victor Rask has not had a good year for them, and they thought he was a player on the come. They do need that young star player that can propel them, but I just don't think that Ron Francis is going to give up a Justin Falk or is going to give up a Noah Hannafin, in spite of the fact, Russ, and I was puzzled. I've been hearing Noah Hannafin isn't all that great.
Oh, stop it.
I'll take Noah Hannafin in about 5 seconds. He's a good hockey player.
No, he's
I don't know. I think I tried to tell people he is not a dynamic offensive player.
Right.
That is not Noah Hannafin's game, but he's a heck of a player who will give you some offense and play great defense.
Yeah, he can play. He can play 30 minutes a game for you.
I heard a commentator on one of the Toronto radio stations say that already that Werenski and Provorov have exceeded. Like if the draft was today, that Hannafin would be taken 7th or 8th, and that those two would be picked ahead of him. I still don't think that means he's not a good defenseman.
I mean, they're different types. They're different types.
Yeah, and I think Werenski and Provorov, might go before him, but I still think that's not really fair on Hannafin either. I mean, he is a different kind of defenseman, and those two have definitely, Werenski and Provorov are the two best young defensemen in the league right now. But I think that as far as rookies go, but I think as we go along here. I will
say this about Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Ron Francis, I got to be watching the junior playoffs really closely because Nikolai Waugh had a hell of a run in the World Juniors. He's a big kid. He's in his 4th year, and he's got 67 points, 29 goals. He is a big body. He might be that guy they can bring in and try and get some games out of him and see if they're close, if he can produce, if they're not able to make a trade. I mean, but I think the problem with the Avalanche is they're very slow and plodding, and it's possible no deals happen through them.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of this is. I think you're right. I think a lot of this is set up, almost for what they're going to get later, and
yeah,
and you could very well see a guy like when Carolina was closer to the playoffs, they probably weren't going to be trading any of the guys who were expiring contracts, but you could see a guy like Ron Hainsey traded to a team that needs a bottom pairing defenseman. I think that's a likely.
That would be great idea I think Hainsey and Edmonton would be fantastic. I think that's
that would be good actually.
If I was Edmonton, I would go for Hainsey, and I've heard that rumor as well.
And Adam Larson hurt his back in the last game. He's not playing tonight, so they have Darnell Nurse coming back, but he's coming back after a very serious injury. Where he's out over 2 months. So
people have to realize that how well the Oilers did without Darnell Nurse is impressive. Like that to me is
that is impressive. I agree with you on that.
I think he's their most dynamic defenseman, and he really does. As far as getting the puck up ice to the great forwards that they have, you're going to see numbers by McDavid go up considerably when Darnell Nurse is back in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, a team that you would think would want to keep defensemen, the Oilers supposedly have been shopping Brendan Davidson, one of their defensemen, because they know that they're probably not going to protect him in the expansion draft. I don't know how much interest there's going to be out there in Davidson. I mean, he seems like an okay defenseman, but nothing spectacular. So maybe it's just a preemptive move to not lose somebody for nothing.
I think it's just that's all it is.
With I got to say, if here's the thing. Right now, the Oilers look like they're in good position, but there's still a lot of games left. And so they really do have to stay away from injuries on defense, especially because that still could derail their season.
Yep.
Calgary had an impressive win last night.
Yep.
They really did. And I do still worry a lot about Nashville. Like I don't know what Nashville is anymore.
Well, but when will we ever know what Nashville is? That's my point with Nashville. Is always fascinating with them is that we don't know what the hell they are ever, and we're always worried about them, and we're always sitting there saying, "Oh, they don't have enough of this, they don't have enough of that," and yet they always make the playoffs. They're the craziest team, I think.
They are the craziest team, but this year they're really in danger of missing.
Oh yeah, they are in danger of missing, but they have they do find ways. That team has always found ways somehow to make it in.
Yeah, but that was also, and look, Subban scored last night, but that was also when every year they've been chipping away at different things off that team.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Subban hasn't completely kicked in yet with Weber being gone. So when you're talking about they always will make the playoffs, that was with Weber.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great point. And he's a huge player, and Subban hasn't been. I mean, I think in this first year, I think Montreal's won this trade. No, Subban's been good, but time will tell, of course. And we don't have that discussion now, but for the short term, Montreal has won the trade. And I think many people probably thought that Montreal would win the trade short term, but the so that plays out a little bit. But
all I'm saying is the psyche of the team now is not the same, having to come back from behind to make the playoffs like it was before with Weber.
No, agreed completely. I completely agree.
One thing before you ask the next question, this morning Bruce Garriock from the Ottawa Sun reported, and I'm writing about this for the Rumor Buzz, that the Senators, he gave Pierre Dorian, their general manager, the green light to go out and make some moves in terms of adding forwards, because they've as we said yesterday, they've lost Stone, they've lost Hoffman, MacArthur is out for the year. They still won yesterday. I think it was 2-1 over the Devils. So they continue to win even though they're very shorthanded. So if money is not the problem here, that you could see the Senators going out and maybe getting 1 or 2 forwards before the deadline.
Just got a text from somebody who says he's heard the Islanders may now be the team leading for Duchesne. So I got to look into that more. But that the Islanders are going to make a strong push for Duchesne.
Yeah, I think the Islanders are going to be in on every name that we hear now, because their owner's going to make sure that they call everybody. But until something happens, that's when I'll get excited for the Islanders.
Oh yeah,
of all the potential destinations that we've heard about Duchesne, the Islanders are the one that makes the most sense, because they have the young assets and they have the will to make that move. They have all these young forwards. They have, I'd say, 3 or 4 prospect defensemen. They have their first round pick, and they really want to make the playoffs. And that's why I think there's motivation there. And plus, if you get Duchesne, that's another in the positive column about, getting John Tavares to sign that long-term extension. Yeah. So I think the Islanders and I'm not sure, I'm not looking at the rumor chart right now, but if they're not number 1 for Duchesne, they should be at a close number 2.
Yeah, they're very close up there. I don't know where they are right now exactly. I've got to go update the rumor chart this afternoon, but I think they will be number 1 after that. After that text I just received.
No, I could see that, but like I said, I mean, there's so many moving parts with the Islanders that I have to actually see something happen before I could say, okay. I can't go heavy into speculation with the Islanders, because it's possible that some players don't want to go there because they don't know where they're going to be playing, and they don't know what's going to happen to John Tavares. And there's a lot of things that could play into it.
Yeah, that's true. Although
just because they want somebody doesn't mean they want them.
Yeah, no. Although Doug Wade has helped them a lot, I think, in terms of players do like Doug Wade. He's got a really good reputation around the league.
But he doesn't have a contract either.
He doesn't have a contract yet either, I know. But I think he's going to.
I mean, I'm just saying, it's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, I know for sure. A couple interesting stats before we go today. Who is leading the NHL in minor penalties?
Minor penalties, who's the leader?
Superstar player. There's a superstar player leading the NHL in minor penalties.
Well, it's not Ovechkin, because he's never in the box.
And a superstar player who's missed considerable time this year with injury, which is kind of crazy.
Jonathan Taves.
Nope. He did get his 4th hat trick last night.
Yes, but he's not a top 5 player.
I'm not saying top 5 player. I'm saying he's a top player. He'd arguably be a top player.
Sidney Crosby.
Nope. I don't think he has any at all.
Evgeny Malkin.
Evgeny Malkin, yes.
Okay.
Evgeny Malkin leads the NHL in minor penalties. That's a really strange statistic. When you think about it, like Malkin is so, is such a big player that, he could. I've always said that Malkin should draw way more penalties than he draws for some reason.
But he is like Baby Huey too, and he does run over people.
Oh, he does. But I think he gets a lot of. I don't think he gets any breaks from officials, because honestly, I'm always been surprised that Malkin doesn't draw more penalties.
He's the Russian bull in the china shop.
No, like Malkin reminds me of King Kong when they used to have King Kong with all the different facial expressions, and he was kind of funny and goofy. That's what Malkin reminds me of sometimes on the ice.
I like that. So we talked about Carey Price to save. We got to share that with everybody. Here we go. Ready? All right. So hold on. Here we go. This is something.
And by the way, in King Kong in the trailer, they showed Mothra. I didn't care about the movie. Now I care because Mothra is in it.
There's another King Kong.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a really. It looks good.
Come on, can you get?
Dude, it's got Mothra. Shut up. I don't care.
Here we go. Here we go. Carey Price to save last night.
Crazy.
Just insane. Yeah, I mean, just this is
the funny thing was the series at the end of overtime. You had a Plekanec break where he rang it off the pole, and then they came back with the two on one. Here we go. There it is.
Plekanec in the post.
It was the best 15 seconds of the year, Russ. It was
and I got to tell you, the first Rick Nash breakaway that Price stopped, Nash had every bit of net to shoot at, and Price managed to just creep over and take away everything. I mean, Price really had a great game.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is literally stealing a point right there.
Yes.
You know, that you never. I mean, there's no reason in the world that the Rangers shouldn't have taken that win right there.
And you know what? Galchenyuk is snake bitten because he hit the iron too. He looked good. There's no way I'm going to ever say he is not the player he should be. He's just a little snake bitten at the moment.
Yeah.
And Russ, he might not be a center.
Right. That's true.
Here's the interesting thing about the save to me, okay, is the fact that Carey Price is always we're always talking about Carey Price being like the typical he stands up and the puck hits him type goalie, you know?
Uh-huh.
He is the best positional goalie in the league.
Yes.
And so it's rare to see him in this kind of position.
Right.
That he can make this save. But
3-on-3 forces you into that, right?
That he makes this kind of save in that position.
And we would be remiss if we didn't say at least a little something about the Leaf Winnipeg game last night. Peter Tessier wanted to be on the show because he wanted to vent about that because there were two teams. It was an exciting game, but two teams that are almost totally bereft of defense. Patrick Laine had 2 goals. Looked really good. A couple great snipes. Austin Matthews had 3 assists. The battle for the Calder continues. I think
I watched the third period of that game. It was weird.
Yeah, it was just. I mean, Russ. I mean, the Leafs were down to 5 defensemen. Connor Carrick got hurt in the second period. The Jets came into the game without Myers, without Enstrom, and Trouba was suspended. And you had guys like Paul Postma probably playing 20 minutes. It was wide open. It was no lead was safe, and it was just. I mean, I'm sure at the end of that game, Paul Maurice and Babcock were pulling their hair out of their heads.
The one thing I came away from that game, and look, that one penalty for Matthews, like you sent the funny text to me, hey, he didn't mean to do it. It's true, but it's still a penalty.
Sure.
But the point is, when you watch a game with Laine and Matthews in it, Laine has no defensive responsibility in the world.
None.
Zero.
None.
No, you're right. He's hanging. So.
But he's a
doesn't diminish his greatness as a scorer.
Not at
all. He's a rifle with a hair trigger waiting to go. I mean, the first goal he scored, one timer with a defenseman right on top of him, and it beat Anderson no problem.
But like when Matthews was put in the box, the reason he was in the box is because he is trying to make a defensive play, and Laine doesn't even attempt that. Like, he doesn't even have that in his arsenal.
Yep.
You're right.
To me, that's the difference between the two. That's why Laine is going to have to outscore him by 10 goals or more to win that award in my eyes. Now, I did hear something. Darren Millard is talking about this split vote theory with Marner. To be honest, now that Marner's gotten injured, I don't think he's really in the mix like he was.
Marner might be one of the 3 finalists, though.
He might be one of the 3 finalists, but I don't think he's going to steal votes from either of the top 2.
No, I mean, you got to remember, and we know how the voting works here. You vote 1, 2, 3.
Right.
You rank them. So the people who are going to vote in Toronto, I mean, it's not just going to be all Toronto writers. It's throughout the league, throughout the PHWA. So they could vote for Marner. They could vote for Marner 3, but that doesn't mean they're going to vote for Marner 1 and vote vote above Matthews.
Right.
Okay, so the last thing actually to talk about is this concept that the Kings have put their goalie on waivers, right? Their backup.
Yeah.
Backup. So and the question remains: is this because Jonathan Quick is close to coming back, or, as has been thrown out there by some people, are they trading for Ryan Miller? I have heard that they are not trading for Ryan Miller.
I don't think Miller would go because Miller's smart enough to know he'd be second fiddle to Quick.
Right. And I think that still think that now that maybe things could change between now and the deadline, of course, and
because Miller's in charge of his own destiny, correct?
Oh yeah, he has say, and
yeah,
and I mean, of course, his wife's an actress.
I know.
So, but I think that he's been living in this world long enough to be okay with where he is.
Yeah.
And I think that at the same time, unless they go to Miller and say Quick's going to be out the rest of the year.
Correct. That would be the only way that changes it.
Which could change it, But if Quick it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like Quick is coming back.
I mean, Quick is practicing. That's all I know.
Yeah. So, and I think that also, I think the Canucks still have a shot here. So
they do.
I think, and Miller's a big part. If they don't have Miller, then they don't.
I mean, Mike says they don't, but they do.
They don't have a shot without Miller, though. That's for sure. So
no.
So to me, that's where tonight. For those Flyers fans out there, the next 2 games for the Flyers are going to be hugely telling, and they are tonight.
I'm sorry. By the way, Zadkov being waived doesn't mean he's going to be sent down.
Right.
They can keep putting him on waivers. They have Jack Campbell.
Yeah. Don't they do that? Don't they put a certain amount of players through waivers so they pass through and?
Yes.
Yes.
And then they can demote him and open up his $900,000 in cap space to be able to finagle.
Right. So it's a financial matter, really.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, some people are saying that the Bruins might look at him as a possibility. I don't know.
I thought the Bruins would look at Andrew Hammond, and he went through no problem. So
yeah.
So the Flyers, like I was saying, the Capitals tonight at home, tough game for the Flyers. The Penguins, of course, Saturday night outside.
Well, the outside game, like you're going to it, Ek?
Yeah, I'm going to it.
Yeah, and I'll be there too. We're probably watching that game on Sunday. But anyhow,
when are you driving out there?
We are driving out there Friday about 4 or 5 o'clock.
Okay.
We're caravanning with like 4 of us.
Okay. Yeah, I'm driving.
So if you want to meet up for dinner, just text me. But anyhow,
cool.
But here's the thing. So tonight is a must-win. You don't want to say anything's a must-win with 20-something games to go, but it really is a must-win because this is, to me, if I'm the coach, I finally have to come out and say to my team, getting into overtime does not help us in this game.
Yeah.
We have to go out there and take this game. We can't bleed a point out because, they're going to start playing a lot of teams now. Then if they start bleeding that point out, soon they'll find themselves out of the playoffs. And I think this is the one, to me, if you're going to start winning, this is the one nobody's expecting you to win. You need to win this game.
Yeah, and there's a lot of games left for the Flyers against the Metro Division, which is a tough spot for them to be in. When the schedule comes, that's something that'll be in my.
And we know Neuwirth's in net, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that.
I have not heard, but we're assuming.
But they're playing the Capitals. Of course, they're putting him in there.
Yeah, he had the good playoff series last year against them. So
yeah,
it happens. And he was a former Capital himself, so all possible. But yeah, those are 2 majorly important games, for these teams. For the Flyers, I mean, not so much for the Capitals. So.
And this will tell me something about the Capitals because I didn't like the way they lost to the Rangers. And let's see what they do with the Flyers. If they're the Capitals team, I think they should win this game by a couple goals.
Well, Russ, I mean, if the Flyers were playing a team that they're battling for a playoff spot, like Florida or Boston or the Islanders, then I would buy into your, that you can't let them earn a point. Right now, I think the most important thing for the Flyers is just to win. If it's in overtime or if it's in a shootout or if it's in regulation, because they win, they're at 6.
No, I think they got to get out of that mindset because they're going to play too many teams from the East, like X said.
I know, but Washington is not catchable.
You're right, Mike. You're right, Mike. Of course, and statistically, you're right. But the idea here is that what Russ is saying is that the players will flat out tell you, that their whole game thing is to get to overtime. Like that's one thing that that's part of the strategy of this coach right now, and that's just it's a very weird way to play, you know.
Well, I don't agree with that strategy. All I'm saying is right now, the most important thing for them is they're at 63 points. Toronto's at 67. You got two teams at 66 and one at 65. So if you want to stay in this race, you got to win. You got to get the 2 points any way possible.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. All right, guys, we'll be back again tomorrow. Thanks for all your questions. I'm going to be doing a blog with a rumor update and answering questions in the 3 o'clock hour. Remember to check back on Hockey Buzz at that point.
Oh, and Holtby is in. So this is a serious game for the Capitals. They're not going Grubauer.
Holtby's in. I'll be down there tonight, Russ, too. So
okay.
I'll see you down there.
Yep.
Without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.